Hello, everyone out there in Radio Land. It is once again that time of the week. What time of the week is it? It is that time of the week where we jump onto your radio waves and we talk about those things that the mainstream media is not talking about. We research and report and analyze issues at the international, national, statewide, and local level from a critical socialist lens. It is your only spot for hearing folks in your own hometown of Kazoo calling the establishment out on their BS. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University. Tonight's bed music that we are featuring is by local band, probably only played 2 or 3 times in its whole existence, Armut and Fizgig Henson. Digging into those deep, deep cuts. This particular track you would have only heard if you were at a basement venue called the Black Lodge about, 7 years ago. I'm getting old. Well, so, speaking of things that are getting old, how about corruption from the Kalamazoo County Treasurer? No, it unfortunately never gets old because we always seem to be hearing new stories about it. I wanted to start off today's show by focusing on a new development, some investigative work done by Channel 3. Kudos to them. And again, we do sometimes give them a certain amount of flack for, of course, being owned by excuse me. Sinclair Broadcasting, yes. Sinclair Broadcasting, which is basically trying to monopolize and push very conservative views. And indeed, if you do watch Channel 3 on a regular basis, you'll notice, your regular local news coverage intermittently interrupted by some conservative jagoff named Boris, who impromptu will just start defending Donald Trump's policies when really you just wanted to find out what was going on in your neighborhood. Anyway, I'm getting a little too rant-filled here. So we've talked a bit before about the issues with the land bank, and particularly Mary Balkema, the current county treasurer. Again, not to hate on the woman too much. Again, she's a Trump delegate. Everybody wants to focus on that. But she also is involved in some more run-of-the-mill corruption. And beyond this story that I'm about to read, there's a lot of nepotism and kind of quid pro quo that goes on. There have been significant allegations with a lot of evidence to back them that it is, a lot of her decisions as the kind of manager of the land bank end up benefiting her and her colleagues financially, as well as a history of some very overt discrimination. One particular story came out a few years ago about her targeting particularly poor black residents for eviction from their homes for delinquent taxes. There was a very famous story about a black blind resident of Kalamazoo. And supposedly, according to witnesses, she actually did, in fact, ask, is he black? Now, this really shouldn't be too surprising for a woman who took a candid photo of herself with her arm around Joe Arpaio, that very fascistic sheriff down yon there on the border. Of course, if you'd been listening to the news last week, you know he's not the only one. So, let's get to the meat of the story. I'm going to go ahead and read from their webpage. And again, you can find this on their website. Its records show Kalamazoo County government has used unlicensed contractor. Posted by Andrew Feather on Monday, April 22nd. Kalamazoo County officials have raised concerns about contractors the county hired to do work with taxpayer money. The News Channel 3 I team uncovered the Kalamazoo County Treasurer's Office has sent hundreds of thousands of dollars in county jobs to a contractor unlicensed by the state of Michigan. County records show since 2011, the Treasurer's Office has sent more than 100 jobs to cutting-edge property services. Records show neither the company nor its owner are licensed by the state of Michigan. All contractors that work for the county must be bonded and insured and licensed, said Kalamazoo County Commissioner Mike Seals. Seals said he was among a number of commissioners concerned about work done for the county by Cutting Edge. He said all contractors working for the county should be licensed. Under Michigan law, contractors are generally required to be licensed by the state if they enter into a contract for construction or remodeling projects worth more than $600. With some exceptions. There are two types of licenses a contractor can earn in Michigan: a residential builder's license or a maintenance and alteration license. A search of the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs shows neither Cutting Edge nor Darnell Clay, the owner, holds either license. Seals said he would never select an unlicensed contractor for jobs in Kalamazoo County. So, a review of financial statements shows between 2011 and 2018, the county had 115 transactions with Cutting Edge with a value just over $450,000. While a few were under $600, the wide majority were in the thousands of dollars. So, again, I do want to emphasize a couple of things here. Just a little bit of digging into this. One, this really is kind of shows the modus operandi of the kind of austerity politics that somebody of Mary Balkema's ilk is a part of. The idea that you would hire people who are unlicensed because, let's say, either it'll save you money or you have some kind of financial ties to them. But again, you see Mary Balkema making decisions that are against the general welfare of the county for either these austerity politics or, again, two primary motivators. If you really look at kind of her track record of either cutting corners in this austerity or basically making decisions that will financially benefit her or her friends. So the second part of that, of course, is hiring an out-of-state contracting agency when, again, there are plenty of local agencies that could be doing this work. It's kind of in a microcosm, that whole argument about outsourcing and making sure that we actually employ people in the community. Of course, what's very funny about that it's actually very Trumpian of Mary Balkema. Do what I say, do as I say, not do as I do. Of course, the real irony is often these conservative commentators who bring up these these conservative politicians are extremely hypocritical, because out of one side of their mouth, they will, and rightfully so, critique the neoliberal politics of outsourcing that have really ravaged Michigan and the greater parts of the Midwest for the past several decades. But when they are actually in office, what do they actually do? And this is why I always tell you, pay attention to what these crooks do, not just what they say. Because when they're actually in office, well, they will do exactly that. They will expedite that outsourcing. They will use it to cut corners, as we are seeing in this particular case with cutting-edge property services. I'm going to go ahead and go on here. Actually, let's take a quick little break. I'm going to go let my co-host in. Be right back. okay. I see we're getting a phone call. Sorry. I see we're getting a phone call. Maybe try calling back on the half hour mark. Sorry, it's kind of hard. This is a talk show, so we gotta make sure we get with the talking and whatnot. I will say, particularly if you have a correction or an addendum to the story we're talking about, please go ahead and message us at the Hoodrat Strategist Facebook page. And again, if you would like to chat with us a little bit, try again, please, at around 6:30. That's when we usually end up going on break. So, co-host Lawrence just joined us.
Yo, what up?
Yep. So, I was just in the middle of talking about this story about Scary Mary. And how she's apparently been using unlicensed out-of-state contractors. And I'll just finish up, and then I want to make sure, like, you get your in, but I wanted to make sure everybody kind of got full extent of the context here. So, a review of financial statements. One estimate shows more than 30 grand in repairs to a house, including fixes to walls and roofing, and the installation of a new furnace. That home was given to local charity Mothers of Hope for $1. Clay declined our request for an interview, but he sent a statement. Okay, this is just some. If you want to read his statement, go to the website. But it's a bunch of mealy-mouthed dodging and diversions. Like, well, we actually didn't do anything wrong because blah blah blah. Word diarrhea. Anyway, the Channel 3 news team, they requested all contracts the county had with Cutting Edge since 2011. They only received one back covering routine maintenance and landscaping at properties in the county land bank. And again, if you have nothing to hide, why are you going to send a broadcast news team what sounds like the equivalent of a leaflet? Anyway. Michael Seals was also quoted by Channel 3 as saying, "It raises a red flag to me because I'm not sure that any protections are available to us with contractors that don't have a license." In the statement, in part, Balkema said, when Clay has performed rehab work for the county treasurer, he pulls the proper permits with the city, and the city inspects his work. He has partnered with licensed builders, electricians, and plumbers, and has passed all inspections. Okay, so again, I really tried to emphasize to everybody, Lawrence, this is part of a larger picture. It isn't that just, because, if you were to read this by itself, it might not sound like a whole lot, like, oh, the treasurer goofed or was trying to cut corners or whatnot, but it's part of a kind of a pathology of austere cost-cutting, kind of nepotistic self-enrichment. And while this doesn't tie in specifically to discrimination, it does kind of point to the larger part of the story that, the county treasurer, Mary Balkema, as she views her position in a very authoritarian manner. She says, like, the land bank is mine. I am the sole arbiter of the land bank. When you are an elected representative of any kind, it is your responsibility to represent, not just take whatever vote total you got as a mandate to do whatever the hell you want. So I don't know, Lawrence, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, dog, I'm happy that the I-Team did cover this story. I'm happy that we're trying to get to the truth, and a lot of low-level local and statewide corruption stories usually don't get covered. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to sit here and say Mary is not corrupt or whatever. Like, we can go back and forth on that. More than likely, I'm going to end up agreeing with you because I have my own personal opinions. But we've seen multiple stories of people cutting corners to make money, and it's not a uncommon phenomenon, and it's much more it's much more common than most people realize. The thing is that majority of the time we don't have watchdog journalism to cover it. We have media lapdogs to give the talking points of the people who are usually corrupt. And I would like to see more transparency from the contractors. I would like to see more transparency from Mary. I would actually like to invite her on the show so we can actually talk about this.
Yeah, oh yeah, actually I did invite her on the show once a couple years ago, and she initially agreed and then ghosted. Right?
Yeah. So we're gonna say this right now. Yeah. We are going to after the show we will try to recontact her and some other people from our local government. Maybe we could talk to Mr. Hopewell and see how he feels about this story. There's a couple people from in Kalamazoo that I would like to hear shed some light on this story.
Any conservative politicians who are listening or more likely have hired people to listen to our show, let's see. If New Deal Grandpa can go on Fox News, you can go on and spar with me and Lawrence. We ain't that dangerous. All right.
No, all the time. Just on policy. Mm-hmm. Just on policy.
Just on policy. Oh,
but I mean, I would love to see. I would like to see more of the story develop, and I want to see some actual justice take place. If some people have truly broken the law and some lives have been ruined because of this, like this is not a story that I think should just be swept under the rug because of how insane our news cycle is.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think it's important to talk about how the land bank is being administered, because I bring this up a lot. There are socialist models for land banks. There are community land banks that either are created independently by the community. I'm thinking particularly down Jackson, Mississippi. There's some really great socialist organizers down there who've done great work in basically buying up a bunch of property with basically a community pool of money, and with the ostensible mission to flip those properties around as quickly as possible to give people homes. There is a way to do this in a holistic, socialist way, where you're trying to make sure that property goes to people who need it. This is the ostensible capitalist way. This is the hard right capitalist way to administer a land bank, and we should not forget that in quote unquote liberal Kalamazoo, that is preferred modus operandi and not the more humane kind of leftist direction.
I mean, remember, you have to remember that we still live in a system in Kalamazoo where if it's not helping the pockets of those that are in power, then we usually don't do it. I mean, that's just what it is. It's not that we don't care about the poor and disenfranchised in our community. I know there's a lot of people that do. It's just that the corruption that we see national and statewide also does sometimes affect our humble little city. And our humble little city sometimes a good portion of the time will do the right thing, but there are times when we need to call out garbage when we see it.
And I always say, and if you've lived here long enough, you'll get exactly what I mean. Kalamazoo, I feel like we're socially progressive, but economically Reagan. That's
that true story.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
True story.
All right, so Lawrence, what would you like to talk about? We got a lot to talk about.
Okay.
First, I'm sorry I was gone last week. I was taking my sabbatical to New Mexico. Some nonsense happened while I was down there.
Oh man,
I was in northern New Mexico. I did not see that in particular, but
okay. So there's a bunch of stuff that I've been wanting to talk about, and I haven't even been doing coffee talk. I've been traveling personally. I've been traveling because of dance competitions and other things that I've been doing. For those who not know, they know my dance name's Anansi. I'm part of artificial intelligence, represent Midwest all day. Anyway, but there was a bunch of stuff. I mean, from the Mueller report coming out to the 5 town halls that happened on CNN and CNN asking worse questions than Fox News. That is not a joke. That's not a punchline. That is real facts.
I saw a meme that's going around now is the Becky from the Harvard Department of Centrism or whatever.
Oh man, dog. Okay. There's a bunch of local stories that we definitely need to talk about. We definitely need to talk about Michigan United criminal justice leadership celebrates Kalamazoo victory. That was a really big story. Yeah. We need to talk about Parchment because they found lead in Parchment's water. Yeah. So, and that's the whole nother story that we still need to talk about. It's been a story ever since 2008, but it's been getting worse. And
do you want to jump in? Let's frame it this way. Do we want to? I think we'll go ahead and take a little break. But do we want to jump in to some good news or some bad news?
See, I every time I come here, I'm always doing the statewide national stories, and there's only one national story that I really want to talk about, and that's Pete Buttigieg. See, here's the thing about Buttigieg. I call him Mayor Pete Buttigieg. You know, I'm a Buttigieg. He's a Buttigieg. We're all Buttigiegs. There is a story that has been developing that TYT Investigates broke, and other people have now started to talk about Pete Buttigieg covering up for racist police officers and then firing people who wanted to talk about it, and or demoting the black police chief who wanted to bring it up because the racist police officers were talking about the black police chief. There is a whole story about that.
Just that really gets me because, like, again, the idea was like this black police chief exposed this racism in his department, and he's the one who got punished. By Pete Buttigieg.
He got punished, and the lady who's that was in the government that was trying to help expose said corruption, she got fired by Pete. Yeah. This was back in 2012, 2013. Now, you know, again, Pete was a very smart, a very openly gay person back in 2012. He was everything that the mainstream media has been trying to say about him now, as in him being super progressive and all that stuff. He fired a black police officer. He demoted a black police officer and fired a whistleblower because white police officers were being racist.
Yeah.
like.
And, you know, it's not just that. It's part of, like, he's got...
Let me read this story.
And while you're queuing that up, I really want to... The big picture, his economic policy falls in line... Because, you know, one of the reasons we're talking about it is, like, he is really trying to claim to be a progressive. And this is a guy, like... I first heard about him listening to, like, Mehdi Hassan's Intercept podcast... which is, you know, basically a progressive podcast. So to a lot of people, he's like, oh, this young progressive mayor. And it's like, I don't know, like, I need to explain to everybody, he is not that. And, you know, I'm to the left of progressive, but that dude ain't even progressive.
When you look at the things that he's actually said as policy, he's to the right of Amy Klobuchar. Klobuchar. See, again, I watch too much secular talk because now every time I say their names, I'm saying what Kyle says.
There was a great article. I'm trying to remember which outlet it was, but they basically did some man on the street interviews in the working class neighborhoods of South Bend. They talked to this black teenager. And he basically says, like, I ain't never seen Mayor Pete around. And, you know, essentially the point that he was trying to make is, while he's been redeveloping downtown, making it nice, more quote-unquote money has been going into the city, the working class neighborhoods, the you know, non-white neighborhoods of South Bend are no more better than they were when Pete Buttigieg first got into office. Yeah. And frankly, That sounds pretty familiar, and I actually do want to point something out. Like, one, it's been shown he's got a history of gentrification. He's literally kicked working people out of their homes to make room for developers. And there's this great quote. This is from my friend Tim, goes by Grim on Facebook, and I just had to read it. This is for anybody in Kalamazoo who is getting quote-unquote excited about Pete Buttigieg. And he says, and I quote, "Kalamazoo, why are we, of all towns, having trouble processing the fact that a gay liberal mayor from the Rust Belt can still be a bad candidate? We're a small Midwestern town that's had a corrupt, moderate mayor for over 10 years who happens to be gay and runs as a Democrat. Buttigieg is white and racially ignorant on top of all of that."
Wait, Tim said that?
Yeah.
Oh, man. The savagery.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. So, let me be fair. And let's be fair because we need to be fair. The tapes that came out, the racist tape that came out before he came out before Pete Buttigieg came into office. And the problem that's with the story is that in the early 2010s, there was a bunch of tapes that started to come out saying that the South Bend police officers, it's in the public record, in South Bend, that the police officers were saying and doing racist stuff. A lot of the stuff that they were saying that were and who they were talking about was the police officer, the black police chief of South Bend, Indiana. They listened to the tapes, and it was a I'm trying to find the lady's name. It was a lady that was a part of the government that ended up finding said tapes. She ended up telling the police chief in the next following year, and they took it to the head of public safety, which was the police chief, right? Mm-hmm. The city attorney got fired for failing to block the request of said releasing of tape, because there was an investigation that the South Bend police wanted the state police to come in and investigate, right? Mm-hmm. So the South Bend police chief did what he was supposed to do. There's some corruption and a scandal going on in my department. I'm going to ask the state department to come in and look for it. Pete Buttigieg asked a government official to stop said scandal or stop said investigation from happening. Sounds very Trumpian, if you ask me. And then when the investigation, when he was denied, he got the government official got fired by Pete Buttigieg. The Pete Buttigieg fired him. So, first of all, Pete fires somebody because they're investigating racist acts that police officers are doing. So
that's no good.
No, it's not that. It's not that. They said that it would affect the electoral ability of the people around them, so they were doing it for their own self-interest. Buttigieg using his power as an official to fire somebody because they did not stop an investigation. That's Trumpian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Two,
I think he also used SJW as a pejorative, which is a very
no. That was when he was in college. Yeah. That was when he was in college, and he was fighting against. That was when he was at Harvard, and he was fighting against people who were janitors actually getting a living wage working at Harvard.
Oh yeah, well that's a totally
different story. But
I know.
That also adds to his elitism type of behavior.
Yeah, just to put a pin on that context. So the idea and this is from his own book, he walked past a bunch of protesters to go to a meeting with New York Times columnists, people like Howard Dean, John Kerry, a bunch of very like neoliberal politicians at like a meet and greet lunch. So like I think that just paints a picture of the kind of politician he is. Like it didn't even cross his mind like, hey, maybe I should join the protesters. No. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah. So the excuse that they have in the documents is that they were saying that the investigation that the statewide police was going to do was going to impede prosecutions in South Bend. Now, if you think that's BS, it's because it is. Because if you're prosecuting people based off of racial epithets or your racial feelings and not the law, then those prosecutions are going to be void. Then you're just locking up people because you're being racist. And those type of police officers should not be police officers. So it's for me, and the only reason why I wanted to bring up this story outside the story being a very huge scandal and it's in the public record, and that the Buttigieg camp basically tries to deny it, especially if you saw it during the town hall. He tries to deny his influence in it when he did have a direct influence after him covering up for racist police officers. It's the fact that we're not holding that same type of energy for him if this same scandal was to happen if it was Bernie Sanders, or if this same scandal was to happen and it was Kamala Harris or Cory Booker. Like for example, if you've ever listened to this show, you've heard me talk about Kamala Harris. I have given her praise when she deserves it. I have criticized her when she needed it. But no one in the mainstream media is talking about this story the same way people were talking about Kamala Harris's stories about some of the corruption that she was a part of. And that's the thing that makes me upset, because I'm like, look, I understand that he's gay, openly gay. I understand that he's very intelligent. I get all that. And he can speak very charismatically, kind of like President Obama. I get that. What he did here was wrong. And if civil rights activists don't look into this story, and other criminal justice activists don't look into the story, we are truly not standing up for the principles that we say we talk about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you know what? It really maddens me about it too is, granted, none of the candidates are really left enough for me, but what boggles me is people like Buttigieg, with that kind of record, with these kind of things coming up about him, is doing better than, Kamala Harris, is doing better than all of these candidates who, even though I have my own critiques of them, at least have a policy platform. And in particular, what's really disgraceful to me is Elizabeth Warren, Tulsi Gabbard, like these are like the actual progressives running, and they are running very distantly behind these very milquetoast, boring ass white dudes that don't have any actual like inventive ideas and are as problematic as all hell. And especially Warren, who's like coming up with really good policy proposals. I mean, granted, she's no socialist, but I would argue, like Bernie isn't really much of a socialist either. But
they're both democratic socialists. That they're socially democratic. Yeah. That's a lot of the things, but also we gotta talk about Warren's new policy when it comes to student loan debt and her mega millionaire tax. We have to talk about that too. But this is my last point about this story. Mm-hmm. The last point about this story is I want to tie it back to the town hall, because he said that he doesn't want people who are inmates to go to vote.
Oh man,
he said,
that made me see red.
See, here's the thing. Yeah, there was this meme of the black girl that was in the crowd. So when he said that all the white people were clapping, and the black girl
shame on all you, by the way,
and the black girl looked around like, y'all tripping? Like, look. I understand what people are going to say. They don't want people like the Boston bombers and people like Charles Manson who are in jail voting. I get that. I understand that. But at the same time, Americans who are having the will of the people, Americans that are having the will of the country done to them without fair representation is problematic, because that goes against the very core principles of America, which is taxation that if you're going to tax me, then I need to have representation. And the fact that there may be people that are in South Bend jail today because of the racist cops that Pete Buttigieg put in jail. Some of the minority activists, some of the LGBT activists, some of the progressive activists, or not even just activists, just people in general that may be in jail because he chose to cover up for corruption, for corrupt individuals, bothers me to my soul.
Man, I couldn't agree with you more. And just to put like one last little point on this topic, particularly talking about like his idea that people in jail shouldn't be able to vote. Anybody who has that opinion, who I think it's really a childish idea, like, oh, we shouldn't let bad people vote. I mean, two things to remember. One, most of the people in American prison are in there for nonviolent drug offenses. And two,
overwhelming majority of them right now are actually are migrants now because of the private prison system.
Well, that's true too.
So we are jailing people who are trying to seek asylum. Yeah. That's an overwhelming majority of our prison population right now. Yeah. And people are profiting off of the pain and suffering of others.
But I also want to make a fine point that this has a definitive class dimension to it as well. If it's your idea that people in jail shouldn't vote, look. Let me just break it down for you real quick. Rich criminals hardly ever spend a single day in jail. They will always have the right to vote. If you're out there saying like, oh, murderers and rapists shouldn't get to vote, well, let me tell you something. There are plenty of rich, wealthy rapists, murderers, probably all manner of sin, who are always going to have the right to vote. So essentially all that you're saying is like, it is only the poor criminal that should not have the right to vote. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. So, again, if you have that opinion, all you are saying it is another form of voter suppression that tries to cede more rights from the poor. And again, in this, in this era of mass incarceration, it has a definitive Jim Crow aspect to it. We saw legalization of former incarcerated people in Florida getting the right to vote last year. That was a huge development, but that needs to be all over the country. Right? People in jail should be able to vote. They either maybe they messed up. Maybe they're in there unjustly. Maybe they're genuinely bad people, but that doesn't make them not people. That doesn't make them not American citizens. And stripping away their rights, son. No.
I mean, look, I understand that we have this thing in our country, in our society, that punishment. We are a punishment-based society. It's a part of our DNA that I don't want to say dehumanize people when they go to jail, but we look at them as the lesser beings when they go to jail because they've done a crime against our society. In a country that claimed, in this secular country, an overwhelming majority of us are Christians. And let me also remind you that as a Christian, Jesus went to jail, and he also said, do not forget those who are incarcerated, because they are also our people as well. So it is the moral thing to do. It is the ethical thing to do. And I would say that it's also the politically right thing to do, to make sure that all Americans, on principle, all Americans who are of age to vote does vote. And that we all get fair representation, because if we're getting taxated and we are having the rules of the government being brought onto us, but we do not have a say in that society, then I would ask you, what was the Boston Tea Party for? What was the whole Revolutionary War for? If we're going to then act like the same people that we fought against for that freedom and democracy.
All right. Well, I think with that, let's take a quick break. And one last thing on Buttigieg. He also has some interesting opinions about people like Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden, basically use them as traitors who should go to prison. And when we come back from the break, I wanted to segue from that to talk a little bit about, we weren't here last week. I did want to talk a little bit about Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, and all that jazz. So we're going to do a quick break. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
My name's DJ Red Special, and I host the Iron Temple. Each Monday night at 10 o'clock p.m., I'm in here playing a wide variety of metal music, including black metal, doom metal, progressive metal, death metal, and more. We're rocking out to classic tracks from years past, as well as fresh tracks from brand new releases. If you want to hear what all this heavy metal noise is all about, take a journey to the Iron Temple right here on 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for metal evolution.
So whatever you want to talk about, if you want to jump into Julian Assange and you want to talk about Chelsea Manning, we can definitely do that.
Okay.
And if you want to talk about the comedian that
in Ukraine, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was sitting here. Okay, so yeah, we need to talk about that and talk about how Peter Dow basically wrote a story talking about how he realizes that Bernie is the front runner. He's finally acknowledging reality.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Peter Dow was pretty famous on the internet in 2015, 2016.
Oh wait, are we back on live?
Yeah, we are.
Oh god,
we are. Sorry.
Oh god, I didn't even know.
Usually I cue you about that. Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Peter Dow. Peter Dow was a hardcore Hillary fan and kind of had like a coming around moment or saw the light or something.
No, he's acknowledging reality. That's all. That's all. He's not giving glowing praise. Mm-hmm. He's not saying he's going to vote for him now. Yep. He's acknowledging facts.
That's true. More than a lot of the neoliberal commentators.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
MSNBC tried to what was it? One of the MSNBC hosts recently was trying to say, well, Bernie's a millionaire, so why is he still going after millionaires and billionaires? like real talk. Like tried to hypocrisy shame Bernie, and I'm sitting here like, you do know he's talking about himself when he says he wants to raise taxes. What's wrong with y'all?
Dude, by the way, there are some rich people that can be down for socialism. We call them class traders. For the rich, that is the greatest compliment that we can possibly give you. Of course, if you're a working class person, it's the gravest insult. But
they called FDR a class trader, and FDR was one of the richest presidents that we had. Can we not?
Let's not forget Karl Marx was gutter trash, who was really good at writing and thinking up stuff. His buddy Engels, he had a rich daddy, so the socialism started with a class trader. So, but anyway, we're getting off the beaten path.
No, dog. Socialism. I'm gonna disagree with you because I was gonna say socialism started with Jesus, but that's
no. That's true.
No. We're gonna that's a whole different conversation because
I do want to correct myself. You are right. Socialism, proto-socialism started long before Marx and Engels. There were a lot of indigenous Latin American cultures that were practicing it. A lot of evidence shows proto-socialist cultures in Africa, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, it gets deep. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to get in them weeds right now.
We'll slot an hour for that.
That's a whole nother conversation, bro. Like, we can even go into the fact that a lot of Native American tribes, a lot of our Constitution was actually taken from Native American tribes. Yep. So I mean, but again, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time. Yep. I'm definitely, because we haven't talked about it and I haven't had a real chance to talk about it, Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning and the Mueller report. First let's talk about the Mueller report because everybody's been talking about it. We need to speak on it because I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about this really much more anymore after this. But basically, did Donald Trump commit obstruction? Pretty much, yeah. That's we've been saying this for years on this show.
Does a bear poop in the woods?
Right, like he was literally doing obstruction in public, and then on top of that, you tried to ask other people to stop the investigation, which is obstruction of justice for you. If I ask a hitman to kill somebody for me and the hitman does not, I will still get arrested for conspiracy to commit murder. So on principle, not even on principle, but by our own laws and constitution, yes, I think that yes, the president broke the law. So
what's really hilarious about that to me, and I'm just going to interject this real quick, is if he'd have just done nothing and let the investigation happen without threatening, cajoling, or any of that bullcrap he did, he'd be fine. Because there wasn't anything incriminating about him, quote unquote, colluding with Russia. But his attempt to stop the investigation is criminal in itself. He's such a dumbass.
But that's the thing. That I'm glad you brought that up. So the Mueller report shows that no, there was no collusion. And if you listen to Glenn Greenwald or Kyle Kalinske or any of the other people that we talk about on this show a lot, that we follow in progressive media, been saying that for a long time. And they were saying no, there was no collusion because if the point about Roger Stone meeting with Julian Assange or some other people meeting with Julian Assange or meeting with the Russians before the hacks began, it bothered me because it bothered me back then when I was saying, yo, why would if the Trump camp was associated with Russia, if they were associated with Russia, then they would have already been given the information. They wouldn't have to go searching for it. Now the issue that I have is, yes, was there a lot of shady garbage going on between Russia and Trump's campaign? Yeah, there was a bunch of shady stuff going on. Is Trump Putin's puppet? Is he a foreign actor? No. Mostly because of their own incompetence. But at the same time, that narrative that a lot of people kept running and our mainstream media kept running was that, yeah, our president, instead of saying, no, our president won because the American people were tired of the establishment. No, our president won because a foreign government tried to help him. That was garbage. All of that was garbage. That entire narrative was garbage. Rachel Maddow and a lot of CNN people who have been pushing that whole conspiracy theory has been garbage, and they were being debunked by people like Glenn Greenwald and others. Did our president panicked because of the special counsel? Yeah, because our president is a career criminal. Mm-hmm. He's committed. Yeah. If you don't think he's committed tax fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and other things, then you're not paying attention because the people around him were going to jail for those crimes. Mm-hmm. So, was he worried about that happening? Yeah, they're fighting to keep his tax returns from Congress.
Yeah, I think he's suing the he's suing the legislative branch. Right now. They're trying
to buy time. They're trying to stonewall so his tax returns do not come out. And when his tax returns do come out, you'll see that Trump probably has not paid taxes in 30 years, like they said before in Fire and Fury, they were inflating prices when they wanted to get investors, and when they were going to banks, they were devaluing his companies when they were doing taxes, and they would increase the value of his companies when they wanted to get investors from banks. So, has he done banking fraud and all that things? Yes. Is he a corrupt SOB? Yes. Did he commit obstruction of justice? Oh, yeah. So if we're going to talk about impeachment or things of that nature, and you want to talk about no one's above the law, not even the president, then on those principles, I can see why Elizabeth Warren and AOC and others are absolutely right. And AOC and Elizabeth Warren and also Rashida Tlaib.
Oh, who's been spearheading that particular effort, by the way.
And Rashida Tlaib, they've brought up multiple points from the amount and the emoluments. Him not defunding from the companies that he had and using the presidency to enrich himself. That breaks constitutional law. He's been doing it. So there is a myriad of reasons why you can say this person needs to be impeached. Mm-hmm. So, for me, the issue that I have is that those that have been wrong about this story and that lied about this story and then was gaslighting folks who are telling the truth, they're not going to be punished for this. There's not going to be any repercussions for them. And they're going to still be in their powers of position to give the American people news.
It's like Glenn and a lot of the other conservative, progressive and leftist Russiagate skeptics have said, similar to the Iraq war, the inflated statements, the outright lies. What happened to those people in the media? Those people in the government who said those things? Well, a lot of them got promotions, and the people who were against the war got fired. Thinking like people like Phil Donahue had one of the highest rated shows on MSNBC. He stepped up against the war, and his show got canceled.
I mean, the late great Ed Schultz, who was also on MSNBC, he was against TPP. He would rail against income inequality. He ended up getting fired and hired as an anchor on RT America.
You mean he became a Russian spy? And,
I mean, Jake Huger, who took what was it? Phil Donahue's view down. I know he took whatchamacallit. I forgot the dude's name, but he's also a super progressive who used to work on MSNBC. Mm-hmm. He took his 6 o'clock spot, and he had the best ratings, and then he would go after the establishment. They fired him and put Jesse Jackson in his spot. Yep. You're like, it's amazing. It's the main reason why me and you talk about we need to have independent media all the time, and we need to be able to explain garbage when we see it, because a lot of Russiagate was, in my opinion, Russiagate was nothing more than liberal Benghazi in multiple ways. Yes, Trump is a horrible person. And yes, we don't like Trump. And Trump should be impeached on a number of issues. Him being a Russian spy is not one of them. And the fact that we literally are still getting people gaslighting about that story bothers me to my core. Because it bothers me because we're not looking at the things that you could if we were to actually be principled, have legit conversations about impeachment over, because our president has committed actual crimes, and because you're not willing to actually speak on the actual crimes that he's doing, you're hurting our democracy.
Yeah, I totally in agreement with you on that, my dear friend. And I did want to mention, this is. Well, I guess we could talk a little bit about Assange and Manning, or hop onto some local stuff.
Assange, Julian. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No. I was just gonna say. So we weren't on the show last week. I just did want to briefly talk, because honestly, there's a lot of. I would recommend check out The Intercept. Glenn Greenwald's writings on it. Caitlin Johnstone, she's got some things has a really good article detailing a lot of the kind of overt lies and propaganda against Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Keep in mind, in the last few years, the CIA had a deliberate project to discredit WikiLeaks in the eyes of the media and the listening public. Now, that's not to say that Julian Assange's hands are entirely clean. He's not a likable guy. He's kind of full of himself. He's played footsie with some figures on the...
His own friends.
He's an a-hole for those.
No.
I had to hit the dump button. But
his own friends that are close to him has said that he is, that he is a jerk. With that being said,
you got to separate that, because here's what's at stake. The fates of really just global journalism. I don't think that's an exaggeration.
Well, it also goes back to our war on whistleblowers. The thing that I would say, if you ever get a chance to look at, Lee Camp from Redacted Tonight did a brilliant 14-minute piece about WikiLeaks, and it talks about how WikiLeaks has challenged the powerful when they have been corrupt. Now, I know some people don't mess with RT, but Lee Camp's stories are the 14-minute piece that he does about WikiLeaks is absolutely amazing. I ask everybody, if you get a chance, to go ahead and listen to it. But the issue that I have is that we have this war on whistleblowers. We have a war on people telling the truth. Chelsea Manning is in jail because she leaked documents showing back in 2010, when she was Bradley Manning, that the soldiers were committing war crimes. That this for-profit war that American soldiers were lied into killed innocent civilians and journalists. Reuters journalists. And then after killing Reuters journalists and civilians, they turned around and did what they call a double tap, which is killing the first responders.
Yeah.
Now, hold on. No. Just to finish my point.
I'm just going to interject real quick.
Go ahead.
I want people to understand, whatever you think of Julian Assange, to sum it up, they're not trying to prosecute Julian Assange for any of the bad stuff that he's alleged to do, or any of that. They are literally trying to prosecute Julian Assange for what I would argue is probably the very best thing he has ever done. So
which is told the truth on those that are in power, because. Think about it. Think about it for multiple reasons, and this wasn't just Republicans that were going after Julian Assange. The Obama administration tried to go after Julian Assange. The Democrats as well, because when you're making enemies of the powerful, then you can't just throw shade at one party when both parties are being corrupt. The thing that pissed me off the most is that Chelsea Manning is in jail. She was Bradley went to jail, Chelsea and all that other crazy stuff, but they went to jail for telling the truth about war crimes that Americans did, that the war crimes Americans did in a for-profit war in a country that did not attack us. What happens to the people that was actually doing the killing, or the people who ordered it, or the people who covered it up? They're not in jail. None of them got prosecuted. None of them are in jail. None of them are in solitary confinement. None of them had to go to an embassy to find sanctuary. None of them. And that's the part of and that's the war on whistleblowers that we have. And same thing with Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden's in another country because he did his job, which was telling the truth. Yeah. So punishing journalists for the act of journalism is how we have the term political correctness. The whole idea about political correctness, for those who do not know, it was Nazi propaganda. It was a way for you to correct the narrative that it politically benefited the people who were in power. During the time, that was the Nazi regime, and that's where the time political correctness comes from. You have, in my opinion, the greatest threat to democracy that I've seen in my lifetime literally being done by the Trump administration, which other people have called pseudo-fascist pseudo-fascist white supremacists. And you have people who are on the left who are supposed to be a part of the resistance agreeing with it. And that's the part that bothers me. What happened to the resistance? What happened to those that were supposed to be resisting this garbage? Because that right there, going after Julian Assange, was garbage.
Yeah, exactly. So I think with that, and just real quick update on Chelsea Manning. As of Monday, her appeal was rejected, and she is still being held in jail for refusing to testify before a grand jury on very fabricated charges against WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. So it's outrageous. My big takeaway: let Chelsea Manning out of prison right the F now. And furthermore, Julian Assange too. He does not deserve to be in jail for that particular crime.
You know what? It's not
a crime.
You know what they're gonna do? They're gonna take Julian Assange and they're gonna bring him to America, and he may not get the death penalty, but Julian Assange is what, 70, 80?
Yeah.
He's not young. So if they give him a sentence that's 30, 40 years, that is a death sentence.
Yeah, and just to really specify it, there's a lot of confusion around specifically what they're accusing him of. A lot of people say, it's of hacking or trying to get a password. It's actually not specifically that. They are also charging him of kind of colluding with Chelsea Manning, goading her on to get more information, which, as Glenn Greenwald points out in his brilliant article, that is how journalism works. That is what you are supposed to do when you have a source like that. And in particular, it goes on to charge him for doing some very basic things to protect his own sources, to protect Chelsea Manning. And again, like if that precedent gets set, that has chilling ramifications for any journalist, any potential leaker out there who wants to get the truth out to the American public, because they then could be prosecuted for engaging in what are essentially best journalistic practices.
Oh, no. I mean, I want to ask those people who celebrate this, who celebrates all of what's happening to Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. Do you think that the Pentagon Papers were a good thing or a bad thing? Do you think the Panama Papers were a good thing or a bad thing? Do you think, because those are looked at and are celebrated in American history, and those things are the exact same things that WikiLeaks do every single day. We look at those moments in history as cornerstones of great journalism. We look at the breaking of Whitewater and now those type of things, of Watergate, those type of things, as cornerstones of journalism. If you are celebrating this, then you are celebrating the fact that any government, if they feel like it, can arrest you when you expose corruption about them. That's what we're setting. That means the United States, if they feel like you've been exposing too much truth to the American people, they can lock you up for doing your job.
I hear that. Ooh. So, well, we still got you here, Lawrence. Did you hear about, let's bring it back down to the state level. There's a couple of things I wanted to talk about. So, Gretchen Whitmer has backtracked a little bit on line 5. I know a lot of people were shouting about this, and there is some nuance to it, but also so this is
I'm so tired of seeing these Enbridge commercials talking about how they've operated safely in Mackinac and all this stuff, forgetting the fact that they destroyed the water system of Kalamazoo and Battle Creek back in 2012.
Biggest inland oil spill in American history at that time.
Right, and I'm in seeing the commercials talking about we've operated for years without having a problem. I remember a year when you didn't. I was around during that time. You ain't putting that into your commercial now, are you? Like, it's, and the fact that I'm not trying to bury the lead here, but the fact that she's backtracked on this when it was a part of her campaign, when it was a thing that they talked about and that she said she would fight against, kind of makes me say Abdul Al-Saeed wouldn't have been backing down.
Y'all should have voted for that nice progressive Muslim boy.
Yeah. Abdul Al-Saeed wouldn't be backtracking right now. But yeah, anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, I do want to say, there is a little bit of nuance to it. I just want to quote like her own words directly. She said, "If we can't hammer out a solution that gets the pipeline out of the water by a date certain that is quicker than what I think the Snyder administration tried to negotiate, then we're going to have to look at all the alternatives." She also goes on to say, excuse me. Going on. The prospect of years and years and years and years and millions and millions and millions of dollars of litigation is something that I am cognizant of, Whitmer said Monday, and no, certainly that's a factor impacting the conversations as well. Governor said she's talking to stakeholders, including Enbridge, about next steps on Line 5. My goal is to get the pipeline out of the water and to make sure Yoopers have access to affordable energy. And one way or another, those are the two things that I got to make sure that we do. It goes on to talk a little bit about the kind of quote-unquote conflict between organized labor and environmentalists. I think that's now granted, what's happening on the ground, like that is something that's been happening a lot in American politics, particularly in the Midwest. The actual unions that build these pipelines are sometimes at odds with the environmentalists who want it out of the water. Of course, in Michigan, I think there's also there's some other unique power brokers at play. I mean, you have actually like a lot of conservative business interests on the lakeshore that also want the pipeline deconstructed simply because of the Great Lakes being a important natural resource or natural capital, if that's the way you want to look at it.
You know what? Here's the thing: we can make a fantastic compromise, and this is a solution that that AOC actually talked about when she talked to the head of Fifth Third Bank and some of the other banks that back the pipeline, that back these pipelines when they spill. When the pipeline breaks, because it's not an if, it's a when, all the union members that worked on the pipeline and the banks must forfeit all the money that they made and their 401ks to make sure that the pipeline does not detrimentally harm the environment and homes of all the Americans that water will be tainted. If they want to keep it in the water, then they got to put up some collateral. And the collateral is I say this as someone who supports unions. I support unions. I do. But at the same time, we act as if we don't live in a country where underwater pipelines do not bust and break. Ask the people at Standing Rock how's the water how's that pipeline how many times the pipeline has sprung a leak within the last 2-3 years.
I think it's been like 2 or 3 separate leaks actually.
Dog, there was I remember the story because I shared it in our group post. There were 5 leaks before like 2008's Thanksgiving. There was 5. I was sitting here like, how it bothers. What bothers me the most,
maybe if they invested less money in surveilling protesters and treating them like terrorists, and more into making a secure pipeline. Sorry, that's morbid talk there. I'm sorry.
That was some Standing Rock shade. Yeah. That was all the way from the other side of the country.
So I was there, so I'm allowed to joke about it.
No, God, Jesus. No. Here's the thing.
When you eat some tear gas, you can tell a joke.
Man.
All right.
Oh man,
let's move on.
That's deep. Yeah. Wow. My thing is the thing that I have, my major issue is we understand that we need to move to renewable gas or renewable energy within 12 years, or the human race will be on the brink of annihilation. That's not hyperbole. No. That's not a joke. That's not a punchline. That's real facts. International scientists that study climate has said that we do not move within 12 years. We do not significantly change what we're doing. We will have catastrophic climate change events that will literally destroy the system that we have today. Yet Gretchen Whitmer, who is the governor of Michigan, who says that she wants to protect the Great Lakes, is allowing some of the Great Lakes to maybe be destroyed by a pipeline.
Yeah, and I want to point out just one bit of analysis here that I think it's important to bring up. It really highlights the difference between like a centrist Democratic politician and an ostensibly progressive or socialist DSA type politician, and it's this. With Gretchen Whitmer, She looks at it as a campaign promise that she has to negotiate around, and she might end up keeping that promise. She might not. I think it's probably going to depend on a lot of public pressure. But there is something about these centrist Democrats that they cannot understand the reality of the crisis. Whereas somebody on the left, like an Abdul El Sayed, an AOC, etc., they understand the extent of the crisis. So they will try to dismantle that pipeline or those pipelines as though our lives depend on it, because they do. Now, of course,
literally,
yeah.
it's not figure. Like, that's not. Again, I always say it on the show. That's not a joke. That's not a punchline. That's real facts.
Yeah.
And the fact and the thing that I see. Here's the thing. And I like Gretchen Whitmer. I think she's okay. She's not Abdul Aziz. I thought she was okay. But, dog, you're negotiating with not just the lives of your children, but the lives of other Americans. Like, water problems in Michigan is not a thing. Like the fact that we have PFAS and lead. Now we're gonna have another oil spill. When we barely cleaned up the one that already happened in Kalamazoo by the same company that caused the one that was in Kalamazoo, like, it. Maybe I'm biased because I remember how it affected my family. You know what I'm saying? So let me put that out there. I'm gonna put that out there. That it's. I remember how the oil spill affected the people around me, my family, my friends, and other people that was in Battle Creek and in Kalamazoo. I remember that. I'm personally invested into seeing renewable energy come to Michigan because it's cleaner, it's safer, and it's going to provide more jobs than the jobs it's going to take to build this pipeline. It's a self-defeating prophecy that's going to have lasting ramifications for not just the people in the Midwest, but for the rest of our planet, because it's these type of actions that's going to make the situation worse.
I hear that. So, moving on to another story, I want to, again, focus more, talk about a couple more local stories. So, tell you what, Buyer's Choice Lawrence, there's a couple of Michigan stories. Rashida Tlaib got threatened by a right-wing nut job. We've got a report on how climate change will strain Michigan infrastructure. We've got a story about a Western student from Saudi Arabia who was executed by their government.
Yeah. I heard about that one.
Yeah.
We do need some happy news. So this is going to be a quick hit. Let's talk about the Northside story real quick.
Oh, let's do that.
Just a quick hit. A quick hit. So there used to be this law on the north side about loitering, and it's mostly about black people being on West Edge because, there are houses on West Edge, and a lot of people like to go to Polar Bear and the strip mall that's around there. That's on the north side. And there were other places that were talking about loitering in some of the other neighborhoods and some of the other areas on the north side. And some of those signs got taken down because black people standing around is not a crime.
No.
Black people living their lives is not a crime. So just because you do not like them standing around does not mean they're doing something wrong.
Yeah. And I want to
it is simple. We've talked about many stories about white people calling the police on black people for no reason. Arresting black people for standing around in the neighborhood that they live in is just as bad. It's just like white people calling the cops on black people for no reason.
And I really want to underscore, this is a tremendous victory. Hats off to Patrice Nicole, a lot of the other or Northside organizers at Genesis, etc., who really made this happen because. These no loitering signs, it is a big deal because this has been a very long-standing tool of, white supremacy and particularly the prison industrial complex. Going back to the post-slavery days, these truancy laws, these loitering laws were used to basically sweep up black Americans and draw them into the prison labor pool. And again, this is
story.
Yep. This is something that was used on the north side again for law enforcement. Just stop random folk who are minding their own business in their own neighborhood, subject to potential harassment or arrest. So again, this is they've taken down a tool of institutional racism down up in the north side, and I just want people to understand the context of that and just what that victory really means.
It is a good story. It's a fantastic story. It's just a good thing all around. Because imagine, this is the thing that I don't think anyone would imagine. Imagine if there was a no loitering sign on Oakland. Or
you can't stand in front of this as a bookstore or Water Street Coffee.
Right. or West, or like right on West Main or Westnedge. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's no loiter. Like, imagine. This is the reason, because even when we talk about it, we're joking, but Starbucks has a policy that they don't force customers to buy stuff while they're in the store, because they understand that the longer people are going to be there, they're going to do something like buy some food or whatever, and they allow people to literally loiter by the definition of loitering. Like, that's their whole business model. Like, would you arrest people at Starbucks? No, you wouldn't arrest people at Starbucks. Why? Because they're loitering. So you're just gonna arrest black people in their neighborhoods, chilling. They're just relaxing, chilling. You're just gonna, like, that's just what we're gonna do. Like, it is a wonderful day in Kalamazoo, in our city, in our fair city.
Yeah. Good things still happen, folks. That's good. And while we're on some good news, because it is good. There are victories out there, people. Just so you know, that's not all doom and gloom. Did you want to talk a little bit about what Dana Nessel is up to? Because I think, it contrasts when we were just throwing a little bit of shade and criticism at Gretchen Whitmer. We could talk about what happens when you actually get somebody on the progressive left in
I
one of
actually
these
do want to
positions.
talk about that story this is actually one of the stories there was a couple stories I didn't get a chance to read. I don't think I read this one, but I heard about it.
Yeah. But essentially, it's this was posted a few days ago, April 22nd. She's setting her sights on businesses that cheat workers. Basically. I'll read a little bit from the article. We'll talk about it. New unit in State Attorney General's office aims to crack down on businesses cheating workers and not paying taxes. This is from one of the affected workers. The guy promised me good wages and steady work, so I said, sure, why not? Said Nolan Ostrowski. He's a carpenter who answered an ad on Craigslist promising good wages for a construction job in Detroit. He worked hard for 2 weeks, but when payday rolled around, there was no paycheck. Ostrowski, he had to sue to get his wages and had to pay his own taxes, adding insult to injury. Happens to millions of Michigan workers, adding up to more than $200 million a year in lost wages each year. Dana Nessel says shady businesses are also costing the state $100 million a year in tax revenue by paying workers under the table and not paying taxes. She's establishing a payroll fraud enforcement unit, and Democratic legislators are promising tougher laws to protect those most vulnerable in fields like construction, landscaping, janitorial services, childcare, retail, and restaurants. Payroll fraud. What's going on? There's a few quotes from Democratic colleagues. I want to go down the number. The numbers represent real people in need of real help. People work hard and should be paid the wages they were promised. People like Ostrowski, who is happy to see the state taking action against employers like the guy who cheated him. All right, so this is good. This is what happens when you get somebody in who is extremely and very much on the side of the workers and the working class. Like, this is a very nuts and bolts kitchen table issue that, you know, I know a lot of people off the top of my head in my own like friend circle in my community who've been like cheated in this manner, and it's good to know that there's like somebody in this state office who's actually going to be looking out for this, because of course our previous attorney general would have probably been on the side of defending those predatory business owners, and was much of the time.
No. It's not a if. It's a was.
Yeah.
Good. Oh no. But it's good when you have people who remember Dana Nessel. She didn't grow up rich. She grew up around people who are probably screwed by these same type of corporations. So when you have someone who's from the proletariat, whose main shtick is protecting those that are a part of the working class, they're going to protect the working class. Like, it's a good thing that we have someone like her that is in the position that she's in, because the overwhelming majority of the time, when we've seen it on statewide, and nationally, judges will side with the corporations, because a lot of times those judges used to work for those same corporations. Remember, we have people who are on the Supreme Court that thought that it was a good idea for corporations to kill their employees, or for employees to die for the benefit of corporations. Like, that's not a joke. It's not a punchline. It's real facts. I think it was Merrick Garland that on the federal who's on the Supreme Court now. There was an ice trucker who was about to freeze to death, and he called his company saying that he'd lost feeling in his legs and his hands, and he drove to keep himself alive. Mm-hmm. And he didn't finish said delivery, and they fired him. And Merrick Garland, I think it was Merrick Garland who said that was okay. Yeah. Not Merrick Garland. Whoever the guy that's on the Supreme Court now, one of the guys that's on the Supreme Court, one of the Trump appointed guys.
It's either Merrick Garland or it wasn't
Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh. Yeah.
No, I think it was Garland.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, like, most of, like, and I mean, I'm not trying to reiterate it, but it's like, it's good that we have someone like Dana who's a part of the proletariat, who's fighting for the people on our behalf, because nationally we have people who will side with corporations because they believe that the corporation is more important than a person's life.
And, you know, I will say, praise to Dana. Of course, it's no substitute for militant and radical labor organizing. But, you know, what I will say to that effect is, because, you know, there are people on the far left do a little bit poo-poo, like, oh, why are you giving Democrats credit for this stuff? It's like, well, it's easier to organize anything on stable ground than an earthquake. Or at least, you know, when the ground ain't shaking as much. So, you know, kudos to Dana for stabilizing the ground at least a little bit, you know.
A little bit, man. I mean, dog, every little bit helps. And the fact that she's able to do so speaks volumes, man. It really does.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think with that, let's go ahead and take a break. We've got a few more stories to talk about kind of here around the state of Michigan. I think we'll talk a little bit. There was a tragic story. Sorry, we gotta be gloomy again about a young Western student, and also talk about some larger state issues. So when we come back, we'll hit on that. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, the only source for political revolution.
89.1 WIDR FM, your only source for Radio Evolution.
Voting is important. From deciding Kalamazoo's best drunk food to picking the fan favorite for Wider's Battle of the Bands, voting allows people to voice their opinions and change their world. To vote for offices such as mayors, senators, and the president takes a little more than a link to a Google Forms survey. Before you vote, you have to register. This can be done in person, by mail, and, in many states, online. For more information, you can point your favorite web browser to vote.gov.
Hello, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Got about 25 minutes left on the show. Wanted to talk about, first, just start this story off by saying, condolences and well wishes to the family and friends of Mushtaba al-Swikat. This was a hometown dude. He went to school here at Western, or was planning to go to school here at Western. And he fell victim to the totalitarian Saudi Arabian government. I'm going to read a little bit. This was posted yesterday, written by Winter Kiefer. You can find it in the Gazette or in Live. Saudi national once planned to attend WMU was one of 37 Saudi citizens executed by beheading on Tuesday for alleged terrorism-related crimes. Mushtaba was among those executed, according to international human rights organization Reprieve. Al-Swikat was admitted to WMU in 2013 and planned to pursue an undergraduate degree in finance. He was arrested at King Fahd International Airport before departing for the United States. Now, if you are a keen listener, you may remember a story about this. It was about, I believe, about a year ago we were talking about this. And at the time, he was still in prison in Saudi Arabia. There were people here in Kalamazoo in the greater state of Michigan begging the State Department, the Trump administration, to use their international influence to help save this prospective Western student. Well, that didn't quite work out, now did it? In fact, what's really distressing and disheartening to me is this young man who was about to be a Michigander, was about to explore our great streets of Kalamazoo here, had his young life cut down by this oppressive government that, frankly, we could have interceded. We could have interjected in somehow. But as the current administration has shown, they're all the more than willing to look the other way at Saudi Arabia's atrocious crimes. Because why? Well, the president said it himself, bragging about all the weapons that our defense contractors are selling to Saudi Arabia. And I am foisting a little bit more of the blame on the Trump administration than I usually do. Keep in mind, granted, Trump administration is at fault for a lot of stuff, but it is also usually more of a tied into American imperialism and capitalism. And of course, that's also the case with Saudi Arabia. We've had a cozy relationship with them since World War II because of that oil, though. And now, again, not only are we buying oil from them, but also selling them weapons. This mutual mutually beneficial economic relationship that is predicated on us willfully ignoring their atrocious record of human rights abuses and totalitarian governance. I think Saudi Arabia is the perfect example of how, again, America is very funny about who they will and won't call a dictator. Maduro, he's a dictator. First and foremost, why? Because he won't play ball with American capitalists. And keep in mind, Maduro is called a dictator when the things that he's accused of doing, and we're not even going to talk about what his government has actually done, because, again, like most socialist states, what the government has actually perpetrated is nowhere near as bad as what they've been accused of. Not to say their hands are completely clean. They seldom are. But, again, Maduro is called a dictator, whereas the Saudi Arabian government are partners. King Salman, he's a very nice guy. He's buds with Jared Kushner and all that malarkey. These are the human costs of that kind of policy that values money more than human lives. And this is how imperialism affects us here in our own backyard, where one of the people who is going to go to the very university that I'm speaking out of is murdered by this oppressive government that our own government supports out of financial incentive. This is, again, how capitalism and imperialism works. Again, I voice a little bit more blame on the Trump administration, because even people within our own government, even people who are typically war hawks, reactionary, etc., thinking of people like Lindsey Graham, for example, after what happened to Jamal Khashoggi, that was a step too far. Killing an American journalist, not necessarily an American citizen, but he was an American resident journalist, part of the media establishment, part of the DC consensus. That was a step too far for a lot of these war hawks. But the Trump administration will not waver in their friendship and allyship with Saudi Arabia. Again, we talked a few weeks ago about, the importance of the Yemen resolution passing in both houses of Congress, but of course was vetoed by President Donald Trump. And by the way, just as a side note, there are still a lot of people I hear from on the right who went down like the whole red pill QAnon rabbit hole that purport that he's a peace president who's trying to pull us out of wars. Shove it. No, he's not. That is a perfect example of it. And again, as I point out time and time again, what he says don't mean jack compared to what he does. And again, according to Air Wars, the collateral damage under the Trump administration has skyrocketed since under Obama. And, I've been critical about Obama's drone record on the show many, many times, but it's only increased under Trump. And he is only anti-interventionist in the very narrow sense that, maybe he doesn't want to go to war everywhere, but you know what? He's totally fine going to war with Iran, and he's totally fine killing innocent people. And if you think less total wars is somehow better, even if we're killing more people, then I would ask you where your moral compass is. I think you might have lost it somewhere along the way. By the way, we still are in the same amount of wars. Granted, we have pulled out of Syria, but we've also been making aggressive actions towards Venezuela and, again, Iran. So who's to say by the time he's out, we won't be in 7, 8, 9, 10 different wars by the time he is out of office. So, again, going back to this young man, Mushtaba, what more can I really say other than on a personal note, I wish I'd gotten to meet this young man. I wish I'd gotten to, chat with him at one of our local restaurants. Show him East Hall. You know what? I wish this young man had met a really nice lady or man, or non-binary person, whatever floated his boat in this particular country of ours, I wish he'd gotten to experience his youth. That's a chance he's never going to have. And you can lay the blame squarely at the feet of our cynical American empire, which again values money more than human life. Speaking of human life, I wanted to talk a little bit about, Rashida Tlaib out of Detroit. I gotta say, one of the purest Michigan moments I've ever heard was a Muslim woman from Detroit with a thick Midwestern accent saying, "We need to impeach them," of course, not everybody likes that. And, there's been a lot of... We've talked a lot about how people have targeted Ilhan Omar out of Minnesota. I did want to bring up this story because our state's own Rashida Tlaib has also been this recipient of a lot of wacky right-wing white supremacist threats. I wanted to read a little bit from this article here. Florida man, damn it, Florida man, not cool. Florida man does a lot of crazy stuff, but this is beyond the pale. Some internet meme about Florida man, but this actually, I probably shouldn't make light of this because this a-hole threatened Michigan's own Rashida Tlaib. John Klest, 49, was arrested on April 19th and charged with making threatening communications. The profanity-laden voicemails, which were also sent to Representative Eric Swalwell of California and Senator Cory Booker, referenced several topics, including gun control, illegal immigration, homosexuals, black people, and Muslims. Tlaib became the first Muslim woman elected to Congress when she won Michigan's 13th congressional district. Quickly became a prominent figure in the anti-Donald Trump movement. Again, her statement, and by the way, what always gets overshadowed, she also wrote a brilliant op-ed, I believe it was in the Washington Post, laying out the case for impeachment. If you just type those words into Google or DuckDuckGo, you can find it. But again, there was an eloquent legal case laid out to back up that fun, profane statement. And this ties back to the messages left for both Tlaib and Booker seem to reference a recent viral video shared by President Donald Trump that purports to show Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota being dismissive of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. So again, our stupid president, is basically threatening by mob, by incitement, by dog whistle, sitting members of Congress. And again, the fallout from that video that was, primarily targeted at Ilhan Omar has ramifications that, again, have affected another Muslim woman in Congress. From the video, Kless said, "You definitely don't tell our President Donald Trump what to say," Kless said to Tlaib, according to officials. All of the messages specifically mentioned the elected officials being killed. So, again, this is another situation where our particularly white supremacist government is doing what it does best. What I try to explain to people, I describe the Trump administration as proto-fascist, not explicitly fascist, but one of the elements of it that is unique, particularly to America, is I almost describe it as a sort of a libertarian fascism. It's the Trump administration doesn't need to organize the brown shirts or the stormtroopers. All it needs to do is kind of send out these fun little messages that decry critics and use threatening language. And the administration's most violent and hardcore followers will pick up on those notes and make these threats and take these actions on their own. it's been this way since the beginning of his administration. Remember the tremendous upsurge in hate crimes that occurred right after his election. It's not that Trump made a specific order and said, go out, my soldiers, and do this thing. It was them taking the hints, picking up their own pieces, and then acting accordingly. And, it's weird that we live in like a political universe and reality right now. There's a lot of people who will outright deny that. Will say, oh, that video wasn't a threat. It wasn't this or that. It's like, how thick do you have to be? How, it's really, people, I think it's, most of the defense I hear, and sometimes from very smart people, if it's not, absolutely literal, then that's not what the president said, and you're being kooky, you're drawing some sort of conspiracy theory from it. What do you call a threat then? What do you call it when you use the bully pulpits to basically implicate a sitting member of Congress as like a terrorist or anti-American, etc.? What do you call that? Now, granted, I know that, liberals' hands aren't necessarily clean trying to, paint Trump as quote-unquote a traitor. He's a lot of things. Unfortunately, as the Mueller report kind of said, he's not necessarily a traitor. He's a criminal in a lot of other aspects. But, the difference is, liberals, making stupid little Russia signs and, praying to the gods of Robert Mueller to come forth and save the day is tangibly different than the base of Donald Trump, whose most violent and reactionary elements aren't going to make cute little signs. They're going to make death threats. Liberals, they got pretty heated and mad, but again, their idea of taking it to the next level was waiting for the Mueller report. It wasn't to go and assassinate people, the president or people in his circle. Anyway, with that, I did want to talk about one more story. And again, this is another local issue. We talk about this quite a bit, climate change, but specifically how it affects people here in Michigan. But there was a very interesting article that came out on MLive. Climate change will strain Michigan infrastructure, say experts. And this is from a recent conference organized and facilitated by several people, including Senator Gary Peters, who, again, I have a lot of issues with, and I hope he actually acts accordingly to what these climate experts said. But I want to read a little bit from this. So here's what they say. As storms, heat waves, wildfires, and floods increase, we expect more injuries, deaths, and acute illness from contact with hazards like carbon monoxide, smoke, and contaminated water, said Lorraine Cameron, an environmental epidemiologist who leads the adaptation program at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Subtle long-term changes can also have negative health effects. Even moderate increases in summer temperatures are associated with increasing hospitalization and death rates, Cameron said, knowing that increasing heat and humidity also aids the spread of infectious diseases like the mosquito-borne West Nile virus. This is a problem that is impacting Michigan now. And then it talks a little bit about who was there. I want to go down more to them describing the climate impacts of Michigan. So while more researchers need to answer questions like, say, the relationship between climate change and tornadoes, the basic underlying science is well established. As far as basics go, this is about as well known as why I would not step off the top of the building and debate the theory of gravity. Panel follows a recent Senate committee hearing on the U.S. Government Accountability Office. So going down, panel members pointed to recent flooding and associated damage as a prime example of climate change-fueled weather already hurting communities in Michigan. Each said investing in efforts like green infrastructure and renewable energy is necessary to reduce negative impacts. Peters opened by listing recent flooding damage in Michigan. 2014 flooding around Detroit cost more than $1 billion, he said. In Warren, an estimated 18,000 structures, about 1 in 3 homes, were damaged. In 2017, Isabella County, flooding caused about $90 million in damage, he said. More than $20 million worth of crops were lost. In the Upper Peninsula last year, flooding in the Houghton area caused nearly $100 million in damage to public infrastructure. Our nation's aging infrastructure simply isn't designed to withstand the growing intensity of storms that are striking communities in Michigan and across the country. According to scientists, the Midwest is particularly vulnerable to the challenges posed by climate change. Michigan and our neighboring states are projected to incur some of the most significant damage to our roads and bridges, mostly due to increased flooding, with costs projected to exceed $6 billion before the end of the century. Extreme heat and precipitation are already happening as well. According to the report, winter and spring precipitation is projected to increase by up to 30% by the end of the century. Heavy precipitation events in the Midwest have increased in frequency and intensity since 1901 and are projected to increase. Around Detroit, aging pump stations have been overwhelmed trying to keep stormwater from flooding heavily used freeways built below grade levels. Pavement heat buckling has become more common. Problem can pose a serious driving hazard. Crystal Mountain is spending more on snowmaking than it once did, and the resort has to plan around shorter winters and less revenue. And I did want to localize this a bit. Here in Kalamazoo, we have also seen extreme flooding, particularly around the area of Park Street, that creek that runs through there. We've seen prolonged rain events rise those water levels and flood the streets in ways that, and keep in mind, I have lived in Kalamazoo my whole life. It's only been in the last 2 to 3 years that I've seen flooding of that magnitude and of that consistency occur on that area around Crosstown Parkway, the area around Patterson. If you remember, that was I believe it was last summer during a rain event. That entire neighborhood got completely flooded out. The area near Crosstown and Bronson Hospital. And again, as this projects, it's only going to get worse from here. And in a global perspective, what's really probably most frightening about that is as this will affect our ability to, our cost towards infrastructure, we are also, keep in mind, one of the more milder impacts of climate change. It's going to be harder to grow crops, and it's going to be more and more expensive to maintain infrastructure, and we're going to get more and more damage from these storms. But by the end of the century that this projects, there are also going to be parts of the United States and North America that will be literally unlivable due to temperature increases and other natural disasters. So my advice, we better get prepared now, because we're not only going to need to protect the future for ourselves, but for the multitude of climate refugees who will doubtlessly be looking towards places like our fair city of Kalamazoo. Well, with that, we are almost out of time. I wanted to make sure, read off the activist calendar here, let you know some stuff that's coming up this week. Coming up tomorrow, over at Parchment High School, Senator Sean McCann is doing a town hall on PFAS and water contamination. That's going to begin at 6 o'clock p.m. Again, that's over at Parchment High School. Also at 6:30 p.m., Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War are going to be hosting a community conversation about military aid to Israel over at the Central City Tap House. Also going on at 7 p.m. tomorrow night at the Vine Neighborhood Association. It's going to be a Vine history night. Not only are they going to talk about the impact of Dutch immigrants, but Matt Smith, who earlier last year hosted an excellent presentation, is going to host another presentation about how FDR segregated Kalamazoo. I think it's going to localize it a little bit to the Vine neighborhood, but it is, again, an incredible presentation. I would recommend anybody check it out. That's going to be at the Vine Neighborhood Association tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Going on later in the week. Let's see. I want to make sure I got this. Actually, that looks to be about it for the week, but I want everybody to keep in mind, coming up soon, May Day events are going to be happening here in downtown. Cosecha is heavily organizing around that. Please plug in if you have the time and the energy. And I want to close out by making an announcement. Again, I've got about less than a minute to do so, but I wanted to do this on a public forum and let everybody know. I am going to be running. Andy Argo, am going to be running for the City Commission in November. I'm going to be doing so with my colleagues and comrades, Tristan Jessup and Emily Demarest. And we are basically running as a socialist slate to take the 3 contested seats that are going to be open in the City Commission. Again, we will be talking more about that in the future, but some of probably our 2 main policy planks are going to be making sure that we have housing justice in the city and, of course, giving more democratic control of the city to the working class. More on that later. Until then, I want to thank y'all for tuning in. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.